Welcome everyone to our AIM Sports webinar series. This where we have been talking about lately. Race Studio 3 came out in Race Studio 3 analysis came out in the production version, and we've been just knocking out function after function after function to try to get some great content out there about individual functions. And today is no exception. One of the last functions that we're going to take a look at. We got maybe a few more here or there, but today is histograms. We're going to talk all about histograms, and one of the things that I found as we were kind of preparing for this and getting ready to go is histograms were so important to AIM and the AIM software team that while we're going to focus on the histogram function, there's histograms everywhere, and they're such a powerful tool and so visually help you understand things, plus the numbers that are embedded into them, that you'll see them on the preview page. You see them you see them everywhere in the channel report. They've colorized in a histogram manner. Histograms are everywhere in the software, but they're so everything we talk about today can actually be kind of applied across the Race Studio 3 analysis software, but we're going to focus on the histogram function itself. And we're going to do that with our co-host this week, the multi-time co-host with us here, Matt from Trail Break. Welcome, Matt. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me, Roger. These are a ton of fun to do, and I really enjoy them. I can't wait to do the next one, and I'm always thinking about different things to put in here.
And I know from speaking with you as we've led up to some of the different ones, you are just like me with these. Number one, they're fun, they're great to do, but we learn so much as we prepare to present the topic that it's always a good thing because in fact, I had an email go back and forth with a friend, and race season is starting all over the country here in North America, and some people that had not really worked in Race Studio 3 a ton before. It is now May, and we are deep into the season, and nothing like competition and people asking questions or running our own cars. That people are really starting to learn Race Studio 3 analysis now more than ever, because in order to share information with somebody or dig in and get information back for you, it's nothing like the pressure of competition to make us learn. So that's a good thing. So Matt's going to join us here. He's the owner of Trail Break, and been out there helping people with their data systems and go faster, selling AIM parts and other things as well. Many-time co-host, a working data guy at the track with professional teams as well. So he deep into this, both from the the racer himself as he races his own car, plus at the professional level, so amateur and pro, and a dealer of the product. So pretty well-rounded stuff here that Matt is going to be able to help us with. Let's talk a little bit like we have with all of these functions. We give you a couple of slides, and by the way, the materials that we'll throw up into the chat box here. If you're watching not live later, if you're watching on YouTube later, everything that we link up into the chat box, or I say we're going to link, will be in the description down below this. If you just go down to the description box and click on Show More, there will be links back to the other function webinars we've done, any links we talk about today, the data files we're going to use today. So if you want to follow along, those will be there. Matt, at the end of this, as we work in some live data, Matt's going to create some Race Studio 3 user profiles. And those profiles, he's going to email those to me when we finish up, and those will be linked in the so you can even download those and make your software look exactly like Matt ends up here when we're all done. So if it's something you really like and you want to use, we'll share those as we go. The presentation that we're looking at right here has just been linked into the chat box. Of course, as a PDF file, will be down in the description below if you want to take a look at that. So I always like to kind of go through and show everybody where we're getting started on this. It's of course Race Studio 3 analysis, and there's a toolbar across the top when you get in there, and it's got all the different icons. What I've done is just zoom in a little bit so you can kind of see what it is. The histogram looks like a mini little histogram. Sometimes that's not always. They try to get it to look as much as they can, but the histogram's pretty points itself out pretty good. It's if you hover over any of these buttons, all of these little tags show up. So if you can't remember exactly what that one meant just next to the histogram, if you were to hover your mouse over it, it would pop up and say, show the split times report, and you would know then as well. So there's the icon. That's what you're going to click on to get to where we're going to be. Once you get in there, and Matt's going to show you some of these once we get into some live data. We're going to spend a little time in the presentation, and then within about 15 minutes, we will be in live data and actually building some of these and talking about them. But the brand new version, the most recent version of Race Studio 3 has had a few little changes, and one of them is the icons used to just be, if they were a toggle, you would just click them and it would happen, and it didn't always give you real good feedback as a user of, okay, what am I choosing? And so what Emiliano and his software team have done is when you get in there, there's going to be some icons. This icon bar will be in the upper left corner when you're doing histograms. And if you go to click on the one that has the percent sign, now when you click on it, it opens up a little sub menu. It just hovers right below it. And now you're given the choices. So it's not just a toggle, click it 3 times, and you kind of know where you're at by viewing it. You click on it, it gives you, do you want to view your histograms based on percentages, on time, or on number of samples? So these little sub-menus are something that's a little bit different, and I think you're going to see this in all forms, in all the rest of the functionality in Race Studio 3 as well. So we have the ability to how do we, the computation method for histograms. We've got how do you want them to be displayed? We can have them as bars or lines. Matt's going to talk a little bit about that. The how do you want to display the values? Do you want to show the bar values, or do you want to hide them? Do you want the amount of information that's in each of those bins to show or not? And then something that's a little different than Race Studio 2. We have the ability to continue with our horizontal bars or turn them into vertical bars. And some people like the vertical bars, which is, I said that backwards, but do you like them when they're standing up, or do you like them coming in from the side? Personal preference, right? So, but we now allow you to orient the histogram bars in a way that works for you. So a little bit of a sub topic there of the buttons and how they're working now, and it's a little bit different. But you will notice that. Okay, what we're going to do, as we have done in almost every one of these functional ones, we're going to go through, Matt's going to walk his way through probably 4 or 5 slides where we just kind of talk about histograms and what are some of the things you might do, a little bit of information about it, kind of how they're made up. And then we'll bail out of the presentation, go into some live data, share Matt's screen, and then we'll build some of the very ones that we're going to look at here in these first few slides. So, Matt, walk us through a little bit of the description. What is a histogram? How would you use it? What is some of the stuff that people use them for?
Yeah, so histogram, sometimes the name scares people a little bit because it's not something we use all the time. But really, it's just a bar graph, right? So we count how many or how many times, how much time, and we kind of stack those up to make the height of it. So we can see what the most common thing is. The real definition, it groups values into bars or ranges and bins, and it shows how often. And then we can plot the height of it as a percentage, the time, or the number of times that range was hit. So a definition doesn't tell us too much, but once we get into it, I think we'll see it. The one that a lot of people really know is for shock speed histograms, and there's books and books written about it. If you want to jump into that, you can grab that information in the data file we share with this. So that's the one that people see all the time, but I don't think it's the one that's the most applicable, because having shock sensors on your car is a kind of more advanced thing that not everybody has. So I think it's a good opportunity to look at some different ones. And at the end, we're going to build into a shock speed histogram as well. So that's sort of the definition. So what are some different ways that we might use a histogram? And, so I grabbed the plot settings first. We're going to go and do these live as well. But when you go into the right click and into the settings, you can see all these settings we have that replicate the buttons Roger talked about. We're going to go through all of those in live. So I'm not going to talk to all of them right now. And then our next slide, we go and we see there's going to be 2 spots that we have to look for some more information on how this histogram is going to show up. And that's in the channel settings. So we're going to look at those, and it gives us an opportunity to set our plotting scale, which is important. And we'll see some of those reasons as we're going through stuff today. But the plotting scales that you set in your channel settings affect all the graphs that we use. So whether it's a histogram or time distance, a scatter plot, any of those, these settings follow through, and we're going to change some of those and play with them as we do it. And then the other one that I wanted to highlight as we look at them is the color scaling. And again, this is for all the plots that we use, and it will change how the colors show up when we're using them. And it also allows us in both of them to set our color scales, or our scaling, so we can have it automatically pick, which I'll show you how to do that with a double click or through these settings. And then we can also set it custom scaled. So if we want to throw out some information or do anything else, we can do that as well. So now I think I showed a couple examples. Oh, another really important one was the dynamic linking. And I want to show this live because it's such an important idea in how we look at data. But when we're in our data file, you can see that we have a point on our time speed graph, and then that point goes through and it shows up in the histogram as well as on the track map. And what's pretty powerful with this is just looking at the histogram, we have no idea where these values occurred, but we can cycle through that time speed and see where it actually happened on the track and the values that go with it. So I think it's a really incredible way to put some extra power to the data and see just how much everything ties together.
And it's not just the histogram function that does this. It just, this is one of the first times we've actually brought it up and discussed it, but all of the different functions. Race Studio 2 was pretty good about this. Race Studio 3, it's 100%. Everything is dynamically linked. Wherever you put your cursor, everything behind the scenes is changing to that as well. So it's pretty powerful.
Yeah, and it goes, one of the ones that on my last webinar, Roger and I, it kind of escaped us because it's a new thing to Race Studio 3. We didn't always think of it, but it's in the movies too. So we can do this. We can pull up the video file. It's available to everyone in the comments below. And with that video file is not only now do we have the time distance, the track map position, the scatter plot, the histogram, but we also have the video position. And we can use that video to play through it. So it's a really powerful way to link all these different data types together and to pull all these different visualizations in. So it's something to think about as you're doing stuff, is sometimes the data doesn't tell you quite what you want, but you can add a lot of value to it by using that dynamic link and pulling in more information and more visualizations.
Okay. Let's talk about some examples of how we might use this.
Yeah, so I want to hit these really quick and then we're going to build them. So throttle position. What was interesting, Jeff Wasilko reached out to me yesterday and we were talking with Roger and looking at some different math channel functions. And he was trying to look and say, how much of a lap is at full throttle? So we were talking about the math and all these different ways to do it. Well, if you really just want a number, a histogram is a great way because we can display the histogram and look at the bins to say what percentage of the lap or what amount of time is full throttle. So this one, I did it really quick and without having to do any math channels or I have to do anything else, with a couple button clicks, I pull up, it was 27.9% of the lap was at full throttle. A comparison a lot of coaches use at different points to look at car setup. When the engineering team will use it too, between car setup, driver changes, sometimes the line changes that a little bit. So a different way to look at some of that information.
It is a great tool. You make one run, make a change to the chassis to something, and if the driver increases their full throttle time, they felt more comfortable or the car had more grip. It's just that simple, right? It's a great metric of understanding that. So that's just one of them.
Right, and a great way to compare two drivers, right? There's so many ways we can pull up this information. The next one I wanted to look at quick with it was gear position. Maybe you're planning, you have I know like David Freeze here, he works with a lot of S2000s, a lot of the guys that have sports race or those kind of cars that they can change their gearing. They can go in here, pull up a histogram with their gear charts and say, oh, am I in this gear? Is it, maybe I'm in between a lot, and get some ideas of how that track flows and what they need out of it. So
we have a question over there, Matt, that maybe we can work in right now because it actually is part of what we're talking about. if I go back one slide, I think it'll be a little easier to see.
Mhm.
2 slides actually. The Dimitar asking the histogram dynamic in a way that if I zoom into a single sector split here, single split down here, if I zoom into number 8, and maybe you can do this when we do it live, what happens is while I can't click on the bins up here and know exactly where I are because it's taking all the data that is 2000 RPM worth of data over the entire lap, as soon as we zoom into a single sector, it recalculates as only showing you the data that's in that sector. So it's the dynamic piece of that is still in play. So exactly right. If we were to come down here and just double click on the header down here of zone 8, segment 8, it would do the math and it would only show you the RPM values that were used in sector 8 over the course of the RPM. So, and the percentages of that, using this as an example. So, yep, it still does work that way. What you can't do is this cursor here. What if I were to come over here and just click on this bin? This cursor will not jump over here because that bin is made up of everywhere that RPM was between 50, 700, and and 6,000 or whatever, and it may be in a number of different spots. I can click down here and the cursor moves, but I can't click in here and have the cursor jump to that spot because it may be several spots. So histograms are a little bit different that way. Okay. Did I answer that, I think, in the way that you would understand it, Matt, as well?
Yeah, it was exactly, and we'll do that live as well. That
Perfect.
with that dynamic linking, it takes it out of the sample set that we're looking at.
Perfect. Okay. Did you finish up the gear one?
Yep, gear position.
Okay.
Another interesting one to kind of compare tracks or maybe plan your setups and things is G-forces, whether it's lateral, longitudinal. We can look at and say, how hard does the car accelerate? What's it like? How hard are the braking zones? How much are we cornering in one direction versus the other, and how much? And as I thought about it, I really love the infographics that F1 puts out. And they have all these statistics about how much of the track is left or right and how much time they spend at these different G-forces. Well, these histograms are really easy ways to get that sort of information. So if you want to say, oh, I'm cornering at over 1G for this amount of time, it can give you that information here really, really quick.
And you can see if it's all left-handers, you wonder why your your right side tires are wearing out faster. There's a reason why, right? You're using them more, and you can quantify that amount with a histogram like this.
Right, and it's one that the more I use histograms, the more I think of different ways to use them, and being able to have the values on it for like time, you can build a histogram and then just kind of add up the numbers really quick to get some of these values that otherwise it becomes a hard math problem or something to figure out, where the histogram gives it to you visually and makes it pretty easy.
Yeah, there you go.
So with this, I think we are ready to jump into some live data and
okay, so what
I think
what we're going to do is we're going to jump over to Matt's. I have to stop my share, and Matt will start his share. And while he is doing that, there was a question, a couple of little questions. Kyle, can 2 channels on the histogram be on top of each other, RPM and oil pressure? Let's tinker with that in the math channels. I'm sorry, in the live data. Let's see what that shows. And then the other one was. Kyle asked, made a comment. Histograms are Throttle kind of useless in my Miatas. The spec Miatas, we owned a spec Miata as a family here, and while I think there is some truth to that, they are more or less, it's 0 or 100. But when you really get to the limit, there's a difference between running 90% at full throttle and 87% because he was able to get to the throttle earlier. So while it may be a number, go-karts are run at nearly full throttle all the time and just off for the corners, it still comes into play. It's just not scaled across that entire thing. So I think you'll still find that there's value. Okay, Matt, what are you showing us here?
All right, so I'm starting out in the screen just as if you opened up Race Studio 3 Analysis and you were going to look for your data. And one of the things I wanted to highlight a little bit was when we open it up and we look here, is our first lap summary is a histogram, and it's with lines, but we can see our lap time versus the lap number. A neat way to kind of look at this and say that the histograms are really all over in how we use our data and what we're looking at. And as I was planning, I thought, well, that was a pretty neat little way that before you even really start thinking about histograms, we get some. So if I open the data session, as we discussed, here's our histogram button. So this is the standard profile that people are going to open up if they download my data and video, or if you have your own data and video from any AIM logger. This is what you're going to see in Race Studio 3. And to get into the histogram is up here. We're going to click that histogram button. And when we do that, we're going to get our new tab. And the first one that pops up is RPM. So we have our measures list on the left, our track map, our histogram, we get a time speed, and we get this storyboard on the bottom so we can pick our laps. So sometimes looking at it, this is an interesting one. And we say, well, what are some options that we have on it? And the buttons that Roger talked about are a great way to start with it. So our first one is to look at, we can hover over it, it tells us the percent, and we can choose how we're going to show this information. And when we click on it, we get the option to pick percentage, time, or the number of samples that it picked in that. So percentage is obviously, if it was 50 samples out of 100, it's 50%. If the time is the sum of the time that it was in that range, and the number of samples is the number of counts that it had in that. So if it had 100 samples in that one, it's going to show 100. And what's nice that Roger pointed out is when we change between them, the icon is going to change. So when we see the clock, we know it's in time. And when we see the numbers, we know it's the number of items. And when we see the percent, we know it's percent. With those, one thing that you won't notice is it's not going to change your histogram drastically because it's coming from the same information. It's coming from the same numbers. So while it will change a little bit, it's not going to drastically change the information you're looking at because the underlying info is really the same. The next button that we have is we can pick if we want the histogram as bars or we want it as lines. So the bars is what people are really used to. And a really neat feature in here is we can turn it to lines. And Roger and I were talking about it. And one of the ones that some people don't notice, and I don't know if it's going to come across on Zoom really well, is when you do this, it shadows the histogram bars in the background for you, and it connects the center point. And when this was released, I said, that's kind of weird. Why would they do that? And then as Roger and I talked about it, I think it's becoming one that I like more and more.
Yeah, it's become my go-to as well. It's I can see the bins in the background, but yet I get this better trend line that makes more sense to my eye visually.
Yep. It's a neat feature. And it's something that just like dark mode and light mode, I kind of go back and forth between them, and I haven't set on one yet, but it's certainly one of the tools that I pull out, and one of the options the software helps me when I'm working with someone to visualize it different. Our next one is we can pick if we want to show these bar values. It's one I personally really like to have those values on all the time because it gives me some more context to it, and I don't have to try to go over to my scale. But you can turn them off if you're trying to make things a little cleaner. A neat option and a neat way to do it. And those values will change as you change how you're reading it out because it goes from the number to a percent to the time. So another interesting way we can do it. And another one that Roger and I had talked about when histograms first came out is we get to change it to be horizontal. This is one, I think the way my mind works is I still think of the bar graphs going up and down, but maybe there's a measure that this makes more sense. And as I'm looking at it with RPM, maybe this one works better for a lot of people because the RPM goes from 0, or it's auto scaled here. So it goes from 4,000 to 7,500. And it kind of shows you that. And then
brake pressures, there's some that might fit that direction.
Yeah, throttle position, all the ones we're going to look at today. It's let's go through and we can play with it. And this is kind of part of the part we talked about with learning as we're using the software. I originally thought, why would you really want them sideways? And now doing this, playing around with it, we see some different ways to show it. And maybe the lines kind of is something that works for you or helps you out in how to see it. And David Freeze saying he likes the horizontal for the shock data. So certainly different ways to look at things. With the buttons, the next set of ways that we can change everything is either through our gear or our plot settings, the wrench up here, or we can right click and go into settings. Depending how you think, if you're kind of icon driven, the wrench gets you into the same place when you go to the histogram, or the right click takes you straight to the histogram settings. Now, some of these settings are duplicated. We still have, do we want it horizontal or vertical? We have the number of samples, but then we start to get some new ones. We get to pick the number of bins, and this goes to Kyle's question, is how do you pick the number of bins in the horizontal axis if we're looking at them vertical? And here we go, we can pick from the 5, the 10, the 15, the 20, the 25, 30. Depending on what you're doing, this is a spot where you have to kind of try to decipher what's most important in your data. So if you're looking at gear position and you have a 5-speed car, 30 bins isn't going to help you out. 5 is a better choice. But if you're looking at shock speeds, maybe you want that 20 to 30. So different ways to kind of slice and dice, and maybe it's one that you just have to play with it a little bit to figure out what you want. Our next option in here is the to show or hide the bar values. Just like the button we have, we can do it right here. And as we continue to scroll down, we can pick, do we want it as bars or lines? And then we get to pick our, I think I skipped one here, chooses. Oh, our values, if we want bars or lines, our axis labels, which I tend to leave on unless it starts to obscure a number that I really want to see.
I agree. And when that gets out of the way, we can point out where, in fact, you can see it off to the left. It says samples over on the left bar, and you can see that it's there.
Scoot this over. So here you have samples, and if we scoot it over here, you have the RPM.
Yep, RPM
so
down below.
We know what information we're talking about, and I always find that helps me because sometimes I'll have different profiles and different data up, and I'm just not sure what I'm looking at anymore. We can also then choose, as one of our more advanced features, is we can put all the channels in the panel, or we can allow different channels in different panels. And then, like all of our features here in Race Studio 3 or all our panels, we get to hide them with the spacebar if we want to do it. So it's pretty powerful in that we can use some of the settings right here from our buttons and our icons. We can do through the wrench, or we can right click. So it really gives you 3 ways to do the same thing. But I find, even though it's 3 ways to do the same thing, sometimes it's just in the mode that you're thinking, whether you're thinking a button or right click or how you're working.
So many different users like to access things in different ways, so it's why not have the ability? Kyle asked the question, and I was reading it there a little bit. Can you choose the bin divisions for the x-axis? And while yes, you can choose the number of bins, what you can't do, and maybe we'll continue to consider it, but say you've got a throttle position and you've got 0 to 100, right? And as soon as you scale that 0 to 100, you tell it 10 bins, it's going to automatically, it's 10% per bin, right? What you can't do right now is go into it without changing anything else and just say, give me 10% per bin. It doesn't work that way. So what you do, and the way I always look at that, if I want 0 to 100 psi and I want it to be 20, to do math here on the fly, but if I want them to be 10 psi per bin, I need to show 10 bins, right? In order to get that to work out correctly. There was, I think Race Studio 2 had the ability to say the width of the bin. So can't do exactly what you're asking for there, but with just some simple math, you can get to what you're after.
Well, I think Race Studio 3 gives us some options. I think we can get pretty close to it, because the next spot I wanted to show you was the channel settings that impact your histogram. So when you go into your channel settings, and the way I do that, because we're looking at RPM, it's on our x-axis label, and we go into the RPM channel settings, what we get to pick is our plotting scale and our steps. So with this is you could choose the steps to be the size that you want, and make sure you have the corresponding number of bins. So if we change this to 4,500, so we have a 3,000 RPM step, and we set the step to 100, we're going to end up with theoretically 30 pins in there.
Yeah.
And then if we go into our settings, we
300.
change this to 30, we will see it's 100 RPM
RPM.
steps.
Okay. Yeah, excellent. That's another way to back into where, but we can't just tell it we want 100 RPM bins, but there's a way to quickly make it happen.
Correct.
Gotcha.
And it's one of the important ones is I found myself saying it more than with Race Studio 2 is with all this great power that Race Studio 3 gives us, it adds some complexity sometimes. So sometimes you don't have a button just to say 100, but we can get the same information. We just have to kind of know the ins and the outs and how to get there.
Very good. Very good. I'm glad we talked our way through that because I think that's valuable for a lot of people.
Yeah. And again, the way I did that was in the channel settings, the important features that we're going to use in those measure settings is the scaling. And when we color it, it gives us our scaling and our step values for coloring it as well. And we'll look at those real time as well. And one of the neat features here as well, just like so many of our other graphs, is we can auto scale our information. So as we have our axis, we can drag them left and right. And I'm doing this by clicking my left mouse button and dragging it left and right. So we can move this around, and we can do the same thing on the Y to move this. And then if we get this really messed up and we don't want to go into the channel settings, a quick, easy way to fix our display is to just double click and to double click. And it moves us back into that information range. Super fast and easy. The double click is something I use all the time.
Me too.
So those are the channel settings that really matter in what we're doing. The next part I wanted to talk about was that dynamic linking and how important that really is in how we view our data and how it shows everything to us. So when we click a point in our time distance, and we can pick any point, it's going to show us that value in that bin space in the histogram. And it's also showing it to us down here on our track map. If we add more graphs to this, we'll see the same link everywhere.
And not only is it doing those three things, which is super powerful, in your channels list, it's telling you what the lateral G's are there or whatever. Every other channel value is happening at that exact spot that you clicked. So very, very powerful over there on the left side as well. Right.
Maybe it's something you're just curious about, but you don't want to display. You can see that value right here.
Oil pressure when you're heavy on a right-hand corner, if you had lateral G's here or something.
So. Right. The other really neat part of this dynamic linking and showing how all this data gets displayed is when we hover over a bin, we get a ton more information. So we get the driver and the session and the time, we get the lap time, and then we get the bin category. So kind of to Kyle's question and the other one there is we get to see the size of that bin. So this one's 5,000 to 5,100. And then it gives us all these options. So when we change our options for percent, time, or number of samples, when we hover over, we get all that information. So we can say the time in this range was 5.6 seconds. The number of samples was 8.8 seconds. And the number of samples in that range was 56. So a pretty neat one. And I see some of the comments, notice this spike over here. So we can look at it and say, yeah, maybe that is something to do with rebuilding the motor. It's really not. The car ran a whole bunch after. And I didn't bend any valves. But we see that's the 7,400 to 7,500 range. And it only had one sample up there. And what's pretty neat when we look at this, we say one sample. Is this maybe a noisy signal? Is this, we can kind of dig into it if we want and say, is this real data? Is this something that's really important to what we're looking at? To find that, you could click on your RPM channel tag. It would show you the min max values, and you could find that that 7492 right there is actually it was underneath it right there. Yep. So it was you put the clutch in while you were still throttled up, and it just gave that that little blip up. Right there.
Okay. Yeah, we
And
quickly dug into that, figured it out. It was not. We knew it was only 0.2 of a second, so it wasn't the end of the world. But
right.
the way to find it.
And a really neat display of the dynamic linking, right? Because we clicked on our time speed graph. We found the point, we clicked on it, it shows us we're in that bin, and then we can hop over here and go, yeah, that's where I
Yeah.
shift from fourth to fifth on the front straight.
There you go.
So I had sloppy footwork. Like super fast, we just solved the problem. A neat way to do it.
Answered the
So
question at least, right? We didn't solve the problem, but we answered the question.
right.
You still need to clean it up, right? At the next
I
time you go out.
do. So a neat way to look at it. So this is a graph. Maybe you use it to plan for your event. I know some of the guys on the webinar here have used it. They run a different track. They go to Daytona, or they go to COTA for their national races, and maybe they have a gearbox problem one year. Well, then next year when they go back, they can use these kind of graphs to say, like, well, maybe a different gearing is better. Maybe it'll help my motor live longer through an endurance race of the season, right? So there's some good value in here.
It's interesting the way that you shift at Lime Rock in this particular instance. It is interesting to me that you've got that 52 to 5300 where you zoom past that both on the upside and the downside. Don't spend a lot of time there. You spend much more time at 5000 than you do at 5200. It's just kind of interesting how it works out.
Right. So a neat way to kind of dig in and go, like, is this a characteristic of the track? Like, what are all these things going on? I'd love to say that's just the motor being really strong and it pulls out at
Just
5200.
so fast. It went right past it. Okay. Yeah, that was it.
But we showed the throttle histogram in the beginning, and we say, how do we build that one? Well, so we can turn off our RPM channel, and then we can pull in here and pick throttle. So again, I love the search feature. I type in the search bar all the time instead of scrolling to find it, but you can certainly scroll through your list and find it. I love that search bar. So here we can get a graph of throttle position over the lap. This is a great example. We had set this for 30 bins. Well, having all these little tiny segments in here, I go, 30, that's too many for me. So let's go in and set it to 10. Because if we're dealing with percent, that gives us 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, so on. Now it helps a little bit. And then I look at it, and to the point we were talking about before, we go, geez, like 20.4,
yeah, it's not perfect. Yeah, it's not perfect.
So let's go into our channel setting now and change this 0 to 100 with 10 RPM steps. Apply and exit. And then now this is a graph
recalculated and showing it to you, and you're off and running.
Yeah. So this is a graph I can get behind. I go, well, I understand 0 to 10%. I understand 90 to 100, right? That's full throttle. And we go, this lap was 42.4%, or I'm sorry, yep, percent, because we have it right here. 42.4% full throttle. This is something that we can now use to really compare our data. We can look at and see what to do with it. Now, I also say, geez, I'd like to get back here. I like this as a profile. So what do we do to do that? So we can go over to our gear icon and we can save the profile as, and I'm going to call this one webinar histogram. And when I say okay, we're going to see it processes very quickly. And we now see on our tab for the session, we are in our webinar histogram for Lime Rock.
The first piece of that tab is always the user profile that's being used, that's active, and the second one is the track.
Right. So now we've got a great one, and we can go back to this anytime we want.
And we're going to share, and we're going to build some more, but we're going to share those with all of you that are watching this either live or later on YouTube. But there'll be a user profile exported file that you can import and set yours up to look exactly the same.
Right. So now, if we said we want to do the gear one, I thought something that'd be neat to put in here with the gear to look at these as well is we have our new button up here, and this is our custom layout. And when we click that one, we're going to get a new tab, and I'm going to call this gear histogram.
Typing on live TV, that's never good, right?
Right. And I'm not a good speller to begin with. So this pulls up a whole new layout that we can choose anything in here we want. So we can have, right now it pulls up a time speed to start, but we can right click and change this to be a histogram panel. So now
That
we
was
have,
that was something we haven't covered much, and you went past it pretty quickly. And I found myself doing this wrong for a while. You went in there and you right clicked, bring up the right click again.
yep,
What I was doing for a while is I would remove the panel, then I would add a panel. And the choose panel option, I don't think we've ever really discussed it heavily. He went straight from a time distance to a histogram by just hitting the choose panel. It comes up with a submenu, and it comes up and says, okay, well, it's histogram now. What would you like it to be? And it just replaces it. Everybody, if you haven't found that, you got a spot that you've got something in and you just want to change it from a histogram to a map, use the change panel or choose panel option. It's very, very handy.
very, very powerful. Because say we want a scatter plot here all of a sudden, we have a scatter plot of this information. We want it to be back to the histogram. We pick histogram, there it is.
Choose panel,
boom,
histogram, boom.
right away.
I find that to be, I didn't even know that was there until about a month or so ago.
Okay, yeah, super powerful, great way to look at it. So now we've got our histogram, but we don't have the channels we want because we don't have gear. So let's turn off our RPM channel. Let's turn off our speed channel, and let's get in here and pick gear. We pick our calculated gear, and we look at this and we go, geez, again, we have like 0, 0, 1. We go, well, this isn't really
Bins aren't quite right. Yep.
Makes sense. So we go into our measure settings. We say 0 to 5, but look at this. The step value is a half, but we don't have half gears. We want whole gears. So let's change that to 1. And it's going to recalculate here. And we say it still doesn't look right. And we go, well, geez, what's going on? Like we set it to whole steps and we see whole steps, but we're forcing
you've got it
10 pieces
bins
of information into 10 bins. So we right click and we go to settings, and then let's change this to 5. Now we have a gear chart that makes sense.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep.
Yep. So we can say in this lap, I was 48.3% in 5th gear, 39.2% in 3rd gear. And then I saw some comments about this earlier, and maybe a question was, what's up with these? Like, were you really in 3rd gear for 0.5%? No, those are the shift points. And we go, well, geez, what do you mean, Matt? So kind of as Roger talked about, if I right click and I want to add a panel below this one, choose our time speed, then we're going to have our graph, right? And we can pick these lines and reset it. And we go, look at that.
There's your little drop downs, why it's calculating the difference between one gear to another, or you put the clutch in right there for a second, or something happened.
And here's the power of our dynamic links, right? And when we start to look at this, we go, well, I want to add a track map, because where on the track is this one? I'm not sure. So we can go over here, we can recreate our other very similar view. We can add a panel below our measures, and we can choose, make it the track map. And there you go. There's our shift point. And we can see where these values are coming up. And I go,
and this is a calculated gear position. So if you had a gear position sensor, you wouldn't have the dropouts, but that's since it's calculated and probably only at 10 samples per second, we get these 45-degree lines or these dropouts occasionally.
Right. Again, my slow feet.
So, we can blame it on Matt.
Blame it on the driver. I've got a t-shirt with the excuses. So as we look at that, we can then say, well, geez, I kind of like this profile. And you know what? I like having this histogram page here as well. I want these all to be in one. So we can go over and we can just save our profile.
We're building something here.
Keeps adding. So now the other one we looked at initially was G-forces. So geez, we could make a different profile, but maybe we want to add it to this one. So I can add another custom layout. And let's call this one G-force histogram. So look at that. We pop up, we get the same sort of window. So again, we're going to change our window. We're going to right click, choose our panel, pick our histogram. We've got two channels showing that aren't necessarily what we want. So let's turn those off. And then I'm going to type in GPS. I get all my GPS channels. And we can pick lateral acceleration, longitudinal acceleration. So now we can see these profiles of the track. One of the things that I really like in here is we get a chance to really use these labels, right? Is we know which graph is which graph and what it's showing us because we have those labels turned on. And the other thing though, is I look at this and I go, well, I have a label, but it's the colors are kind of the same. So we can go over here in our measures list and we can pick our channel and we can change one of these colors. So now we have longitudinal acceleration, right? Forward and backwards, and we have it red. And we have our cornering, our lateral acceleration, and we can see that as gray, almost black. And we can say, well, geez, our other ones are kind of always look pretty similar. So maybe this one, we want to have the time. And this one, let's set it as a graph, a line graph instead of just the bar graph. And what's pretty neat with this one is we can look and say, here is our 0 on longitudinal acceleration, right? And as we go up, we have 4 values. So we have 22.6, 25.7, 0.2, 0.3. So we get 26, 48.6, 48.8% of the lap we're accelerating. So it's not a math channel, but we can really look quickly and go, what percentage of a lap are we accelerating? What percentage of a lap are we decelerating? And we can get those values really quick and really easy. I think that's a really powerful tool because as I start thinking about tracks and I'm getting ready for things or I'm kind of looking at data, sometimes I go, well, geez, how much of the lap is really hard cornering? And we can look at it and go, here it's 3.7. Well, it's only 0.3 here. Right, so it gives you a different way to look at things.
Yeah, and visually, if you zeroed out the not zeroed, but balanced out the scaling left right, especially on the vertical on the lateral one, you would get even a visual left and right amount. So yeah, if you evened up those 2 and 2, right, instead,
right,
you're going to see that now it's in the center of the box, and now visually you can see how much time you're spending on left-hand corners versus right-hand corners.
An interesting one here, right, is now this label is sort of obscuring our 0. Mm-hmm. So maybe we turn off the labels for this one. And I always think to right click, but we can do it up here. We can go to our wrench. We can go to histogram and we can pick.
Scroll down and hide labels. And it's on the x-axis.
Oh, I hit the wrong label. So we can go in. Show that one, hide this one. There we go. So now we can see where our 0 is. And we see that this track, it's Lime Rock, right? It's super biased to right-hand turns. And we can see just how much, right? One left-hand corner, not a really hard high G-force turn, but we can see this visually now in our data. We can add up the amounts and see it all how it works, right? Like, only we have it on time, so that's 2.9, 5.9, 6.2 seconds of your lap is turning left out of 63 seconds, right? So you have 57 seconds going to the right, right? Pretty stark contrast to how it all goes. And we say, well, maybe we want percent here. So again, we can do the same thing, add them together. We have, this is 4.6, 9.6, 9.8% of the lap is a left-hand turn, right? So this, like, it's an actual thing now. We can say it's 90% right-hand turns. So I go, geez, this is kind of cool way to look at different tracks, maybe compare tracks, maybe to plan your car setup. or wonder why your left side tires are always worn out when you leave Lime Rock. And if we like this, again, we can go up here and say, save profile.
And
We got a whole new one.
yeah, perfect. And so we're saving this for everybody, but Dimitar, I'm sorry if I'm crushing that. He's asking a question that we actually touched on earlier. Maybe you could do if he wants to look at what one corner and where it fits. So if you added a time distance bar there down below, and then have the ability to zoom into a certain series of corners, down there at the end of Lime Rock, where you got the left right, maybe we could see something that's interesting. So while Matt's setting that up, yes, we can zoom into a specific corner or a specific segment. It's going to be segment based in the AIM software world, and just by double clicking on it, it's going to redo the math on the on those and show it to you.
Yep. And the reason I added my track map here too, because this is where I can usually figure out in the data right where I'm looking. But when I add the track map, it's going to zoom in and it's going to show me what section of the track we're looking at.
Yep.
So if we look at Big Bend, I'm going to move my segment a little bit here. We zoom in, and then now we can see this is the segment we're highlighting in our data set. And actually, let me go back out because the first one's
probably the second is the better one. Yep.
Yeah. So here is the segment of track we're looking at. And if we want, we can turn on our satellite imagery behind. I'm going to make that a little thicker, pick a better color. So now we can really see the segment of the track. We can see my car right there leading up to it. And then we get our data, and we have the histogram that relates exactly to that portion of the track.
So you've got that for both lateral, longitudinal, right, showing you the speed or whatever values you wanted to have down in the bottom. And if you go back up to the channels and bar up above and click on the laps button, all right, there, it's now actually also showing so powerful the actual time you spent in that segment for that lap plus the other segments around it, the other laps around it. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's a very powerful view right here.
Right. And I forget that these segments are here, but really quickly you can look and see consistency. You can look for your fastest one. You can see all those things super fast.
And just select a different lap right here if you wanted to. And it's just going to leave this view and just add a different lap in. There now you're doing 2 laps. But you could even just select individual laps. And if you looked in there and you found one that was super fast, you would change right to it and say, okay, well, let's see what did I do there. So
another one, one of my favorite buttons in Race Studio 3, we can go to our laps button. We can add our best 3 laps. It's going to stack those for us. We can add our best 5 laps. Again, it stacks them all. We say now, this is a chance where you go, geez, we can't see all these labels. It makes it a little too busy. So let's go in here. We can pick to hide the bar values. Right? Super quick. We can change what we're looking at. We go bars. Oh, that's the one. We can set it to bars if we want. We can see how they overlay. Really powerful, really quick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this back to say the best lap. So we have a pretty powerful view, and I go, geez, I think I like this one better than the profile I saved, right? I think this is an improvement. So let's go in here and save this again. So at the end, Roger will put this up with the video and give you a really powerful way to do it.
If you don't want to recreate it, it is my hope that everybody, as you watch this, you'll slow it down and pause it and recreate it. If you want to have a place to start, we'll have these user profiles available for you.
Absolutely. Now, because we're getting pretty close to the end, I wanted to show everybody the really powerful one that we all think of as the shock histogram. And how do we build that one?
You need to walk through it fairly quickly, so let's. But it is fairly fast and easy to do, so that's kind of handy.
Yeah, and if this part made sense to you up to here, the rest of it's going to go pretty good. So the way I'm going to start is I'm going to close some of these layouts, and I'm going to go back to just my histogram. I'm even going to get rid of the original opening one, and I always approach these things with how do I want? I can imagine what I want. I want 4 histograms, so I'm going to get rid of my other panels. So I'm going to remove a panel. I'm going to add a panel to the right. Choose histogram. I'm going to add a panel below.
While he's doing this, what we're doing a little bit different than what we did before is we were just stacking them up before in a single panel. We did two one time there, but he's actually opening up 4 histogram panels, where if you were to add different channels and stuff, it would it's breaking up into a natural 4 corners of the car.
Right. So now I have 4 different panels, each with a histogram. We can see they all are showing the same information. They all have throttle position. And I say, well, that's not really what I want. So I'm going to go up here to my wrench, and I'm going to go in, and I see they're all here named histogram. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down for each of them, and I'm going to say, allow different channels in different panels. And I'm going to do this on each one. And then now what that lets me do is I can put a different measure, scaled however I want, in each one of these. So when I do that, I lose all my plots because I haven't told it what to put in. So now I have to go over, and I know down here I did a quick math channel earlier, and that's going to get covered in one of the sessions coming up. And I'm going to say, show this in one of my panels. And I know this is the first one, so it's the first. Key thing in how we use the different panels is we can right click and change the setting for this individual panel. So I'm going to call this one right front. And I'm going to set the name for each of them. Settings, right rear.
While he's doing that, you'll notice that it's histograms and then it's got chevrons around it. Every time it adds another one, the first one is just histogram with no chevrons. This one had one pair. That was the second one you opened. And the last one he's going to open has 3 or 4 of them on it. Or none. That was the first one he opened. Okay.
So now when I do it, these panels have a name. And I can go back here and I can say, show it in the right front. I can say, show in left rear. I can say, show in right rear. So
still a little work needed, but we're getting closer, right? We're kind of setting the bones here.
This is sort of what we saw before. And we say, well, geez, this is kind of good, but it's not exactly what I wanted. So let's go in and change our scaling. So I can go to our measure, click the gear, and I can go, geez, 5 to 7. Now, through use and getting ready for the webinar, I know that my car, those are the extreme shock speeds I see. But if I want to see really good data, I have to look 3 to 3. A quick kind of thing you can do in here is I turn off the steps, so it's going to pick the values for me, and then we can say apply. And I can go through all my channels now to do this.
That's what that apply button is over there. It's actually applying those changes. While it doesn't show, it's recording that you made the change, so you don't have to jump in there 4 different times. Pretty handy. And I saw that come up in the chat a little bit earlier.
Gotcha. A quick way to do it. I can apply and exit. And now I'm going to see, well, geez, this looks better, but it doesn't really look like a shock histogram because there's not quite enough bins, right? Normally we look at more. So the way I would approach it is I would go to the wrench, and then now I have all my corners, and I can go through here and say I want maybe 20 bins, 20 bins, 20 bins, 20 bins. Say okay, and now I have more of the regular shock histogram that we're used to seeing.
Yep.
And from here, you can really dig in and you can personalize this however you want it. You can change colors. A previous host, John Block, used to set it by the Windows logo.
Yeah, that was pretty fun, pretty good.
But Windows, my computer doesn't have the Windows screen on it, like the little sticker on it anymore. So I don't remember all my colors. But
doesn't matter at that point. You've made the point fairly well. And the other point, and this works the same way. If you were looking for, that's a full lap of histogram. If you wanted to go to one corner, you would just add the time distance bar. You'd zoom in on the corner. If you wanted 5 laps worth of data to get a big picture of what your shock sensors are doing as far as the histograms on the plus and negative side, you'd select 5 laps, right?
Right.
So all good. Okay. Anything else
Um,
you want to add there as you're kind of closing that one up, Matt? The live data part.
no, I
We
think
we want to
that's
save that histogram one more time, obviously, or this is a different one.
good call. So we're going to say file, save profile as, and we can say webinar. Instagram.
So you're
And
going to end
then,
up with 2 different user profiles when we're all done here. One's going to be kind of the joint one with had all the ones he built, and then there's one specialized one that had the histograms for the shock absorbers,
right. So
shock
hopefully
velocities.
hopefully that gives everybody some different ideas of how to use histograms, how to look at them maybe in some different ways, how to personalize it, and how this function can really build things to show you what you want to do and get through those details of how to change them.
It's Tice has the answer there, right? But I didn't even notice it because we were going so quickly. But the right rear one there does look a little funny, and your eye ought to immediately see something and go, "Well, why is that?" And if you look, the units there's a meter per second versus an inches per second. Would just need a quick change in the units for that one, and it is fixed, right? Great job. Tice to see that the inches per second, apply an exit, and then you're going to have the right unit. So that shows how quick it is and easy to fix. Nicely done.
Right.
Thank you very much, Tice.
And a side note too, our RPM histogram, and looking at these, we say, geez, these histograms aren't very good, and these shocks are actually out for rebuild.
Well, there you go. You have been down this road before and realized it, and they're off for rebuild. Interesting.
Yep.
Perfect. So if you would unshare Matt, I would be able to share mine, and we will share.
Back to you.
And let me share that screen. Pop. There it is. Perfect. I appreciate it. I think we covered a bunch in histograms today. Not only some of the basics of what are they, how do they work, how to set them up, what the icons look like, but then we dove in and did 4 pretty typical examples. One of them being a little bit more advanced with the suspension histograms with velocities. So gives you an idea of what's out there. I appreciate it very much, Matt. A little bit about what as we kind of tidy this one up and close her down. This one, like all the rest of them, as soon as I can, usually takes an hour and a half to get it up onto YouTube. You can go and watch it later if you had a chance to watch it on your phone at lunch at work or something. You can watch it later on YouTube. Always available. All of them are there. 207 videos there now, so we're adding them up pretty quickly. The customer support. I always include this slide because it's so important to us. And internally we always talk about it. We're a customer support company that happens to sell electronics, the racing electronics. So it is important to us. We want you to make sure that you know that you can give us a call if you have any needs whatsoever. Give us a buzz if you have any problems. Love to help you guys out. What's next? We kind of go full circle. We've done a webinar that was kind of touched on this one a few times, but we're going to focus 100% on the opening database function in Race Studio 3 analysis. There is so much power there, not just finding a test and opening it up. There is more to it, and I want to talk about it, and I want to give lots of good tips and tricks of how to use it, how to preview data, all the different things we can do here. So Emiliano will be joining us a week from now on Tuesday, May 17th, where we will kind of tidy up our database, our Race Studio 3 function videos with going back to kind of this starting one and closing it all out with some good power on how to jump into all those other functions, how to open data, preview data, and jump into the other functions. So join us in a week with Emiliano. Will come join us, and we'll have a great time doing that one. Here's where we're kind of heading. Of course, today's one was the histogram. The database one is next week. As part of the presentation materials, if you grab them, you can click on all of these links and go and watch any of these videos. This exact same bit of information is in the YouTube description down below, where we're putting all of these focused functional pieces of the Race Studio 3 software since it's gone to production. I'm leaving these links in all of these so you can go from one to another very easily without having to jump out and search for another one of these Race Studio analysis focused webinars. So go ahead and click on any of those you want, and look forward to seeing everybody here next time. The little bit of contact information, Matt passed along a lot of information there today. His contact information, obviously you can visit his website at trailbreak.com. And Matt at trailbreak.com to get a hold of him. Matt, anything else you'd like to kind of add on our way out here today?
No, I think we hit most of the questions. We gave a good description of everything, but if people have questions or they have anything they have trouble with, reach out, shoot me an email. I'm happy to help you out and get you through kind of whatever that hurdle is so you can use your data to the best that you can.
Perfect. Matt has done a ton of them. Brick just threw in some links to some of Matt's stuff. He also has some great documentation on how moving profiles around. We're going to share those. That link will be in the description below as well to help you get the profiles that you're going to download and bring them on into your Race Studio 3 if you don't know how to do that. Again, there's my contact information. I appreciate everybody coming. I appreciate Matt you doing this again with us. Look forward to seeing everybody next week when Emiliano joins us for the opening database page. Talk to you guys next Tuesday. See you then. Bye-bye.